I honestly think this might be the most fun video I have ever made. I wanted to come up with stupidly absurd and unrealistic add-ons that could make each killer more fun to play as, or sometimes even fun to play against. Let's just say they get pretty wild. We start off pretty tame with the simple killers, but as we continue, the ideas just become more and more insane. Trapper, tripwire attachment. You can now place traps on walls. Wall traps have a very faint glowing red laser sticking out infinitely in the direction the trap is facing. If a survivor steps through that laser, the trap launches off the wall and continues moving mid-air until it reaches something. If it hits a survivor, it traps them. If it hits a wall, it breaks. So you could use this kind of as a tripwire into buildings or to kind of zone the survivors into a specific area. Plus it has infinite range, so you could put it across the map, and as long as there's nothing blocking it, it could theoretically injure someone from all the way across the map. I just think it'd be a really interesting extra addition to his trap that can catch a lot of survivors by surprise if they don't notice the red laser. Wraith, broken skull. Every 90 seconds, an illusionary wraith spawns near each of the survivors out of their field of view and lunges at them. When it hits them, the wraith completely disappears and it doesn't affect the survivor in any way besides just giving them a heart attack every minute and a half. So what I envisioned for this add-on is like, think about you being on a generator in Larry's. Every 90 seconds, a fake wraith would come around the corner swinging at you and completely jump scaring you, but doing absolutely nothing. I just think it would be hilarious and it'd be really fun to play against. Plus, maybe the wraith can see the auras of the illusionary wraiths to be able to kind of get some information out of it. Hillbilly, improvised wheels. After charging at least 85% of your chainsaw, hold control to place your chainsaw on the ground. It'll slowly move in the direction you placed it until it hits an object, then it'll be immediately returned to you. This can break doors and downed pallets, as well as downing any survivor that it comes in contact with. The further it travels, the faster it gets. So this would just allow you to have an extra option of what you want to do with your chainsaw. So if you're in a chase, you can kind of set it up so it breaks a pallet while you continue chasing the person, or you could just save some time breaking doors or pallets that you don't want to go up to and kick. Plus, it'd be a really high skill, high reward thing that would allow very, very skilled billies to be able to pull off downs with it. Nurse, triplets breath. You are now limited to one single blink, but this blink will cause two other nurse husks to come out of you in a trident formation. Then you can press control to swap between these husks before you fatigue. And your fatigue window is twice as long, and your lunge after a blink is twice as long. So essentially, when you blink forward, there's going to be another nurse on your right, and there's going to be another nurse on your left a few meters away. So for one, it'll really confuse the survivor because they don't know which one is which. You're going to be able to kind of move between them. So if the survivor is in between two nurses, you're likely to get a hit. I feel like it'd be a fun way to kind of change up how the nurse is played. So instead of it just being you blink to the person and then use your second blink to hit them, now you actually kind of have to think about how your other nurses will be positioned. So for example, if you angle yourself perfectly on Shaq and you blink right in the middle, there'll be one nurse at the door and one nurse at the pallet, which can force them to be trapped inside Shaq if they don't take the window. It would definitely make her worse, but I feel like it'd be kind of fun. Huntress, iridescent shaft. This one's really simple. After holding your hatchet out for 5 seconds, you can see the auras of all survivors at least 40 meters away from you. It takes 3 seconds to charge your hatchet, so you have to wait an additional 2 seconds to be able to get this effect, and it allows you to just go for cool long shots. I think playing Huntress and going for long shots is one of the most fun aspects of her once you get good at her. It is so unbelievably satisfying to hit survivors far away, and I feel like this is the perfect add-on to kind of amplify that style of gameplay. Plus, it's also just a really good information add-on. Michael Myers, hallucinogens. 10 illusionary Myers stand randomly around the map with no tear radius and no red stain. So there's just a bunch of Michael Myers just like in random spots of the map. Every time a survivor is unhooked, the locations of each of these Myers will change to another random location. Hold control next to an illusionary Myers to take its place, giving you the undetectable status effect until you move. I feel like this would be a hilarious additional like jump scare Myers playstyle where the survivors will just never know if you're real or not. Like there will just be a bunch of essentially statues of Myers just randomly around the map and you can take their place. So it's kind of similar to the snowman and winter events, but much more prevalent. Hag, unborn egg. If you place a trap and then hold right click right on top of the trap, you will place an egg and the trap will have little flames coming out of it. This egg will sit there for 2 minutes to incubate. After 2 minutes, anyone that triggers the trap will cause a tiny version of Hag to jump out of the egg and latch onto the survivor's leg. This will give you killer instinct on the survivor if they're ever within 24 meters of a trap. Other survivors can pull the tiny Hag off of the person's leg to get rid of it. I love the idea of just a small version of Hag jumping out of the jump scare and attaching to someone's leg. I don't know, she just reminds me of Groot for some reason, and I feel like this would be hilarious and it would actually be useful because you can get really good information on where the survivors are. It would create kind of an interesting gameplay mechanic where if a survivor sees that one of the trap is on fire, so it's incubating the egg, they can either pressure it so that they can't get the downside of getting the baby Hag, or they can leave it be and risk getting it attached attached to their leg later. Doctor, iridescent EMP. When in Madness 2 or Madness 3, the survivor suffers from 4 different effects. All progress bars are hidden, like healing, generators, totems, etc. All generator pistons are completely still, preventing survivors from hearing or seeing their progression. When all 5 generators are powered, the red lights above the exit gate switches will never turn on, and the doors will not make any sounds when opening. And lastly, survivors will see illusionary breakable walls. So basically, there's just a huge lack of information for the survivors, which can make them just very confused and very lost and just don't really know what to do. I feel like it would create a lot of really interesting small moments where survivors don't really know if they should commit to something or if they should leave it. Plus, they'll never know if the exit gate switches are 99, which can really deter them from going there. Also, I just decided to throw the breakable walls in there because I'm just surprised that we haven't seen that on Doctor yet. All right, this one's a fun one. Bubba, iridescent Grandpa. Grandpa will spawn in the back of the basement. Every 3 minutes, Grandpa will yell for 5 seconds, showing you the auras of any survivor that moves during the yell. If this sounds familiar, you are absolutely correct. Every time a survivor loses a health state, you gain a token on that add-on, which represents a certain amount of blood. If you go up to Grandpa, you can feed him the blood, making you lose all your tokens. Every 3 tokens, Grandpa gets leveled up to a maximum of level 5. Each level up decreases the cooldown of Grandpa's yell by 30 seconds. At max level, all survivors' auras will be shown during the yell, regardless if they're moving or not. However, the survivors also get an additional thing in the trial. After breaking a totem, the survivors can rummage through the broken bones to obtain a bone knife, which counts as a single-use item. When a survivor is within 5 meters of you and they're not in your field of view, they can press M2 to stab you with the bone knife, which will stun you for 5 seconds. The survivors can also use the bone knife to stab Grandpa, disabling him for 3 minutes. So obviously, this mechanic is taken from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, but I actually feel like it would fit really well into DBD. I think it'd be kind of a fun thing to add additional things to do on both sides for additional effects. And it would kind of break up the repetitive gameplay of just you go to a loop, Bubba brings up his chainsaw until he breaks the pallet, and then you go to the next loop. It'll actually make it a little bit more interesting where Bubba can use the blood to find survivors easier, and survivors have a completely new item that they can use. Nightmare. Iridescent Nightmare. Nightmare from Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is now present in the dream world, walking around randomly. He will completely ignore the survivors unless the survivor looks at them. If the survivor looks at them, Nightmare will sprint at 10 meters per second towards them and will slash at them if it comes too close, dealing a damage state. However, if the survivor stops looking at it, it stops targeting them and begins to wander again. So it's just this huge like beast wandering around the map, and if you look at it, it'll charge at full speed towards you really fast, obviously being very loud and animatronic like, and it'll just kind of force you to be careful about where you're looking on the map. Plus, there are also frettles that'll spawn on top of the generators as the progression goes up. 1 at 30%, 2 at 60%, and 3 at 90%. When there are 3 frettles, any survivor within a 5-meter range will attract Nightmare to them, albeit at a slower speed of 4.4 meters per second. So if you ever look at Nightmare, he'll come full sprinting at you, or if you're above 90% on a generator, he'll kind of walk to you. So it still gives him a little bit of presence on the map. I think this would be hilarious. Obviously, this is completely unrealistic, just like every add-on on this list, but I think it'd be a really interesting mechanic of not being able to look in a specific position unless you want to be absolutely obliterated by an animatronic. The Pig. Specialized grease. While ambushing, press control to crouch. So this is during your ambush, while you're like really fast and swinging your thing. You press control to crouch, and after the crouch animation is finished, you will launch straight forward at blight speed until you hit something, but you won't be able to turn during this dash. So it's kind of like an upgraded version of the dash that you can trigger while you're doing the first dash. So if you want to spend the time to go crouch, charge up your dash, and crouch again, it'll allow you to use this really fast dash, which can be used in loops. Probably it'll be a little bit difficult, but it can also be used for mobility around the map because she really struggles with mobility. And I think it would also kind of alleviate the problem of her stealth being so bad when you're crouched, because if you're able to have good mobility just walking around the map, then you're actually kind of able to use your stealth more often because there wouldn't be as much of a downside. Clown. Shrink juice. You now have a 3rd green bottle. This bottle gets expanded twice as large if you throw it on an elevated surface. Because as Clown, if you didn't know, if you throw a bottle on a high surface, it'll spread out into a larger area. So for this green bottle, it'll do the same thing, but twice as big. This gas lasts for 20 seconds on the map, and while you're in the gas, you turn into a tiny version of the Clown. And also, of course, your laugh sound effects become high-pitched. I think this would be kind of a hilarious addition to his anti-loop mechanics, because if you, as the survivor, end up being in this green gas while he's looping you, you're gonna have to deal with this tiny clown that you just cannot see over the loops, making it really confusing on where you're supposed to go. The clown will still be small on his screen too, so it'll make it a little bit more difficult for him to see you as well, but I think it'd be kind of a funny, almost stealth-based anti-loop ability. Spirit, Shattered Mirror. While charging your phase, hold control to send a mirrored image of yourself in the direction you're looking. This spirit husk will continue walking in a straight line until it uses up all of your power meter or until it interacts with something. It also phases through walls and quietly hums a Japanese lullaby. This will be important in a second. There are a few interactions it has. If it touches a healthy survivor, they'll become injured. If it touches an injured survivor, they will not go down, they will just become deep wounded. If it touches a downed pallet, a breakable door, or a progressed generator, it'll break them. If it touches a window, it'll block it for 12 seconds. And if it touches an exit gate, the exit gate will start regressing. If you didn't really understand the concept of this add-on, so instead of using your phase in a specific situation, you can use this instead if you want to try to catch a survivor off guard, or if you want to use it to regress a gate or a generator or break a pallet or whatever. So it kind of gives you more things to do and more things to think about in a match, because using this ability versus your phase ability will just have pros and cons. So you'll kind of have to decide which one is better for the given situation. And I threw the Japanese lullaby in there just to make it a little more balanced. I know balance is like, we're not talking about balance in this video, but if a random husk did not make any sound and it just walked through a wall and hit you, that would be kind of unfun. So the survivors can hear the husk so they know to be careful. Legion, Polished Shoes. This one is really simple, but I think it'll be really fun. While in Feral Frenzy, everybody in the trial, including survivors, including the killer, receives a 60% haste status effect. So it's as simple as it sounds. Everyone is extremely fast while you're in your Feral Frenzy. This sounds like a buff to survivors, but you gotta keep in mind, when survivors are doing their objective, they're not moving. So you can use your Feral Frenzy to get around the map, but survivors, yeah, they can also use it to get around the map, but they're most likely gonna be sitting still doing objectives. So you'll be able to use this haste more than they will. But it'll make the chases really fun and really hilarious because you'll all be zooming around the map super fast, and I just think it'd be really funny. Plague. All right, this one's a little bit complex. It's called High Priestess. By holding control, while there's at least one corrupted pool, you begin to consume it no matter where you are on the map. For every corrupted pool you consume when you do this, you gain a different effect. So if there's only one corrupted pool on the map when you do this, your Corrupt Purge turns into a projectile with unlimited range. If you charge it fully, it gets bigger and it can insta-down. So think of like a pea shooter from Plants vs. Zombies. It's legit just that with unlimited range. And then when you charge it up fully, it can insta-down. If there's two corrupted pools when you use this ability, it'll be your regular Corrupt Purge, but it'll leave acidic puddles on the ground where you puke, remaining there for 15 seconds. So you can kind of zone survivors with this or block off certain generators that you don't want to be worked on for a bit. So you can create obstacles that survivors now have to avoid. And if there's 3 corrupted pools on the map when you use this ability, your Corrupt Purge turns into a railgun. You have to charge it fully, and when you're charging it, you cannot turn your character, and the survivors hear a very obvious sound cue of you charging it, but after it's fully charged, it'll shoot a puke beam with unlimited range that goes through walls and insta-downs anyone it touches. I feel like this would be so hilarious. Like, just imagine the Plague puking a literal railgun bullet of puke. It'd be so funny. And it still has like the mind games of where she's gonna puke, because, you know, let's say you're in a loop and she's charging her railgun. She could either be charging it at the window that you were going to, or she knows that you're gonna bait the window, so she's charging it to shoot kind of next to the window where she thinks you'll be. So it still has that kind of chase mind game potential, but I think it'd be really funny and it'd just be a really cool ability. Ghostface. This might be my favorite one. It's called Extra Costumes. While you're in Night Shroud, all survivors transform into the Ghostface as well, so they don't know which one is the killer. If you crouch next to an object like a totem or a generator, your character will appear to be interacting with it from the survivor's perspective. So it's just Among Us. It's literally just Among Us in this game. I think it'd be so funny to have every survivor turn into the Ghostface. You won't know who's who. You don't know which one's the killer. You don't know which one's the survivors. And as the killer, you can still fake interact with stuff so survivors think that you're not the killer. It would just make the game absolutely chaotic, and it would just be so much fun. Demogorgon, Broken Guitar. Oh boy. Here we go. There is now another version of the map that takes place in the Upside Down. 4 generators spawn in the overworld and 3 generators spawn in the Upside Down. So it's basically 2 different maps. Both the survivors and the killers can transport themselves between each dimension by interacting with grandfather clocks that spawn near every single generator location. So even if you only have the generators in the Upside Down left, there's still going to be clocks next to those generator locations in the overworld. In the Upside Down, you turn into Vecna and have new abilities. Hold right click to summon a large boulder in the air, which would probably take as long as like a full charge from Plague. Let go of right click to throw it in the direction you're looking. This will damage the survivor. If you hit a survivor with the rock, you gain a token. At 2 tokens, you can hold control to see the minds of all survivors in the Upside Down. If you look at one of the survivors while you're doing this and right click, you'll teleport right behind them with a 3 to 5 second animation. So I feel like this would make a really interesting gameplay mechanic where survivors have to choose whether they want to be in the overworld with a weaker killer or in the Upside Down with a stronger killer. So they kind of have to juggle both dimensions back and forth and decide whether they want to do some gens in the overworld and then some gens in the Upside Down and then split up the last few gens, or if they want to do them all in one dimension and leave the last 3 in the other dimension. There's just a lot of different gameplay decisions that both the killer and the survivor would have to make, and I feel like it'd be really interesting. Oni, Potent Blood. It now takes 3 times as much blood to obtain your ability, but your ability becomes infinite until you down the same survivor twice in one Blood Fury. So you could use it to down all 4 survivors without running out of your ability. So for example, if you're chasing a Dwight and you pop your Blood Fury and you down him, and then you hook him and he gets unhooked, and then you down him again, your ability gets canceled and you have to refill up that 3 times amount of blood. But if you go for every single survivor individually and never repeat the same survivor going down, then you're able to have your Blood Fury up for a long time. I think this would be kind of a fun and interesting way to shape how the Oni is played and make it a little bit different. So you have less frequency of going in and out of your power, but you have a longer time of being in and out of your power. I guess this really isn't a meme add-on, but I think it'd be fun to have the Oni in his power for longer periods of time. Deathslinger, target practice. Everybody in the trial is 60% faster. Survivors now have a small target coming out of their head, and if you manage to shoot the target, it'll immediately down them. This would be so stupidly fun for no reason. It would be completely imbalanced, but it'd be a really fun way to incentivize the Deathslinger to go for cool shots. Plus, everybody's just so fast, so it'd be like a completely different game. I think if you're able to shoot a target on a survivor's head, you definitely deserve to insta-down them because it's already really difficult to hit the survivor on the head. So hitting a target above their head will be even harder. Pyramid Head, Trail of Death. If you send someone to a cage, instead of sending them to the cage, it sends them to an arena. This arena is covered in the Torment Trail stuff, except for a randomized path to the end. A wall closes in from behind them, and if the survivor touches this wall or touches any part of the Torment Trail, they will come out of the arena and will be in the cage. And if they become tormented again at some point later in the match, you can instantly mori them, even if they aren't on death hook. However, if they make it to the end of the arena, they will still be sent to the cage afterwards, but when they come out of the cage, they will be fully healed. So it kind of gives the survivors a little bit of a minigame where they have to quickly navigate this narrow trail, and if they make any tiny movement mistake, or if they don't do it fast enough, then the killer gets a very, very large boost of power. However, the survivor is rewarded if they're able to do this in time. Blight, Slippery Feet. You gain an additional 2 charges, but if a survivor is not injured and not exhausted, they can hold the crouch button for 1.5 seconds to lay on the ground. If you rush into them while they're fully laying down on the ground, you will trip on them, falling to the ground and being stunned for a few seconds. This will make the survivor exhausted and breathe louder for 60 seconds. I just think it would be so funny if the Blight could trip on things. So I wanted to make it interactive with the survivor and the killer. It could create a really interesting dynamic where some survivors might be trying to protect other survivors by laying down, or in a loop, if the Blight is using his ability, you can lay down or you can bait laying down, like you can start the animation but then stop it to try to dissuade him from actually running over you. I think it'd create kind of an interesting push and pull dynamic between the killer and the survivors, and it would just be freaking hilarious. Like, it'd be so funny to trip the killer. Twins, Quiet Mouth. Victor is now completely silent. That's just an overall an already really good buff. However, there's 3D printers that spawn around the map, kind of like Singularity. Survivors can pick up a syringe from the 3D printer, and rather than kicking Victor, if they have a syringe, they'll inject him with it instead. Within the next 30 seconds, if the survivor that injected Victor holds the crouch button, they will be able to control Victor and can use him against the killer. If you're able to hit the killer with Victor within those 30 seconds, the killer will be stunned in place until they're able to get Victor off of them. If you miss, the killer can pull the syringe out of Victor to reobtain him. Victor will automatically return to Charlotte after those 30 seconds no matter what. I think it'd just be so funny to kind of have the survivors and the killer fighting over who owns Victor, basically. Not owns Victor, Victor, but like who has control of him in the match. And I think it'd be hilarious to just pounce on Charlotte with Victor. Plus, it would reward the survivors for being able to dodge Victor, while also still giving the killer a very good buff with him being completely silent. Trickster, Techno Bat. Instead of throwing knives, you now hold M2 to swirl your bat around in your hands, charging it with energy. Once fully charged, you can throw it and it'll reach a certain distance, then change directions towards where you're looking. You also have a small indicator of where you're looking as though you're using the plaid flannel add-on on Nurse. If this hits a survivor, it'll injure or down them. It's kind of like Wesker in the sense that it'll get to one point and then it can change directions and go to another point and damage a survivor. So for example, if you're chasing a survivor at Shack, you can throw it through the door and then look towards the window. And after it reaches a certain point, it'll kind of boomerang towards the window. The survivors can either take the window and you predict that and curve the bat towards it, or they could think that you're going to predict that, so they dodge it. And it would probably just make Trickster fun. Nemesis, Horde Summon. You can now go up to tier 4 instead of tier 3. If you're in tier 4, you can press the control button to switch to a glowing red tentacle. If you hit a survivor with this, you will both be transported into a small arena with 10 zombies in it. You turn into one of these zombies and walk at the same speed as them. Every zombie just aimlessly wanders in this arena. Your goal is to blend in with these zombies, and if you're able to get close enough to M1 the survivor without lunging, you will instantly kill them, eating their neck, or whatever zombies do in Resident Evil. So you'll instantly mori them if you're able to get close enough. Kind of like how Myers has to get close enough to be able to use his tombstone add-on. Exact same concept, but as a zombie. However, the survivor has a gun. The survivor has a gun with one bullet. If they're able to figure out which zombie is you, they can shoot that zombie, returning both of you to the normal world, but the survivor will get an adrenaline perk effect. So they'll heal a health state and also get a really long sprint burst. But if they shoot the incorrect zombie, you will both return to the normal world and they will be fully downed. So the survivor can either not want to risk being moried, so they can just go down by shooting a random zombie. They can wait and be patient and try to figure out which one is you, shoot the correct zombie and get rewarded for it, or C, they just die. I think this would be a really interesting mechanic to add to the game, because as the killer, you have to determine whether or not this time spent in this arena will be worth it or just chase them regularly. And it's kind of a high risk, high reward situation for both sides, because if you get the survivor into this arena, they're either going down, dying, or getting away from you. So the survivor has to make a lot of very quick decisions to figure out what the best option is. All right, Pinhead, puzzle piece. Instead of just holding M1 on generators, survivors have to solve puzzles to progress the gens. Every puzzle they solve increases the gen by 20%. From 0 to 20% progression, the puzzles are hard difficulty. From 20 to 80% progression, the puzzles are medium difficulty. And from 80% progression and up, the puzzles are easy difficulty. This could be a large variety of puzzles, and each difficulty scaler would just be a more complex version of those puzzles. I don't know exactly what those puzzles could be, but it could fit the aesthetic of Pinhead, as well as being hard enough to make the survivors actually use their brain, but simple enough that it's not frustrating. I just think we need more puzzle-like things with this killer, kind of like how when you're disabling a skull merchant drone, you have the like up down arrow stuff. I was thinking something kind of along those lines, but you know, less simple. It would have to be hard enough because the survivors are getting 20% progression when they complete the puzzle, but it would make doing generators a lot more interesting and make it less of a mind-numbing task. Plus, as killer, if you have this on, it's kind of gen slowdown built in, because if they're not able to finish the puzzle, the gen obviously doesn't get progressed. And the reason I have it start off hard and get easier, because if a gen holds a 3 gen or they're using pop a bunch, if you're having to do the hardest possible puzzles to just finish the gen, it's just going to be way too difficult. So instead, I have it kind of start hard and then get easier as it goes on. Oh boy, this is a good one. Artist, Swiss Army knife. By pressing control while you don't have any idle crows placed, the ink on your hand will transform and shapeshift into a different weapon with different abilities. There are 4 different weapons, and pressing control swaps through them in order. Here are all of the weapons. Number 1, normal. This is just her default base kit weapon. She doesn't gain any stats or any changes to her base kit, plus she can just use her crows like normal. Number 2, all-seeing eye. This weapon is you just holding your hand out and has like a floating eye above it. While in this mode, you get built-in spies from the shadows, so anyone that spooks a crow, you can see them. And you can see the auras of anybody within 40 meters from you. However, she gets slowed to 4.4 meters per second and cannot do any lethal attacks. So this is just kind of the information weapon if you want to find survivors. Number 3, shotgun. The artist gets a crow shotgun that'll launch 3 idle crows in a trident formation for 5 meters. So they don't have unlimited distance like your regular crows, but they're faster than doing the trident formation just with your regular crows. They do all of the same effects, but it's just faster to pump these out. However, every time you shoot, you do have to reload all 3 crows, so you can't just like shotgun, you know? There's still like a cooldown between attacks. And number 4, Predator missile. Your hand turns into that laptop thing that calls in a Predator missile in MW2. Whenever you right click, you call in a Crow Predator missile, which will deal the regular Crow effects to anybody in its blast radius. This goes through ceilings because it still needs to work on indoor maps, but if it does pass through a ceiling, it'll not have the splash effect and it'll have to directly impact someone to apply the effect. This would be so funny if you're able to literally call in a Crow Predator missile just in the sky to rain down in an area. I'm just saying that would make artists a lot more fun. All right, let's rein it in a little. Now we have the Onryo, which is a lot more simple and a lot more like normal. Every time you teleport, it shows the animation of you crawling out of the TV, but for every TV. If a survivor is within 10 meters of a fake Sadako and they move during this animation, they scream and their aura gets revealed for 16 seconds. This I actually feel like is kind of balanced. If a survivor gets spooked by the teleport and they move, then you get information from it. If the survivor doesn't move because they don't want to give you the information, but you're not fake, then you get a free hit. So it's an interesting kind of back and forth fake teleport or not fake teleport thing, similar to how Freddy can fake his teleports to gens. And we're getting right back into the fun stuff. Dredge, Blind Eye. The entire trial takes place during nightfall. You move twice as fast, but you are 90% blind. It also activates in-game voice chat that both you and the survivors can hear. Since you're blind, your hearing is enhanced, allowing you to hear survivors from further away and more clearly. The more noise there is, the easier it is for you to see. For example, if you're standing right next to a highly progressed generator, you can basically see everything since it's so loud. You're still able to see the auras of like generators and hooks though, so you still have some guidance. Survivors can pick up lanterns that are just laying around the map to make the nightfall not as dark for them, but the lanterns do take up an item slot. They can turn the lanterns on by right-clicking them, and if the lantern is on, you, as the killer, can hear the slight hiss of the gas flame, so you're able to see everything within the lantern's lit radius. So this will make the survivors kind of have to decide whether they want to see, but risk you being able to see them, or if they want to turn the lantern off and have it be kind of dark, but stay stealthy. Obviously, this idea is inspired by the game In Silence, where it's an asymmetrical horror game where the killer's blind and they can see better when the survivors make noise, and I feel like that could be a really interesting mechanic that might work in DBD. It would just completely change up how the game is played and could be fun for both sides. Wesker. Press Control to initiate a slam attack. This slam attack will create a ring-shaped shockwave of the black tentacle stuff that infinitely grows larger throughout the map. The survivors must be completely still when the shockwave hits them and cannot be interacting with anything. If they are not completely still, or if they're interacting with something when this hits them, it'll injure them and begin their infection timer. After doing this though, your power goes on cooldown, so you can't just use your dashes right after you do a slam. So if you've ever played like Undertale, it's like the blue attacks where you just, if you don't move, it doesn't hurt you. It's basically that, but in DBD. So it can be a good way to kind of force survivors to stand still for a second, or to get some additional injuries throughout the game that still is counterplay. The Knight. This is probably the biggest idea that I have on this list, and it's essentially just a completely new game. This is called the Tablet of Trials. Instead of a regular trial, the game turns into 3 trials and then a boss fight. There are 3 total trials, and each trial is in a completely random order. Each survivor has 5 lives. If the survivors complete their objective, everyone moves on to the next stage and the survivors gain 2 lives. Your job as the killer is to kill all of them before they can complete every single trial. The first trial, the trial of the jailer. This trial takes place in a prison. Every survivor spawns in an open prison cell. Their goal is to find keys around the map to unlock prison cells of other NPC prisoners. Your goal is to hunt the survivors down before they can free 10 prisoners. If you hit a survivor, they will be teleported back to their prison cell, lose a life, and will be locked in. The other survivors must use a key to unlock them again. So it'll be kind of a cat and mouse situation inside of a prison where you're trying to stop the survivors from unlocking prison cells and survivors are trying to free 10 prisoners. If the survivors are able to free 10 prisoners before you can kill them, they've successfully completed the trial and you all move on to the next trial. The second trial is called the Trial of the Carnifex. In this stage, you're in a large building full of barrels. Each survivor is in a barrel. They all spawn on the outer edge of the map and their objective is to get to the middle of the map without being seen by you. Each time they get to the middle of the map, that survivor gets teleported to a random barrel on the edge of the map and you get stabbed by the entity. However, since you're the Carnifex, you break things, you can break barrels with your weapon. This has a 3-second animation though, so it'll allow the survivors to make a lot of progression towards the middle if you're just doing it willy-nilly. But it'll break the barrel permanently, making it easier for you to figure out which barrel might actually have a survivor in it. So it's a little bit of like a prop hunt with an actual objective. If you are stabbed by the entity 5 times, so if survivors make it to the middle 5 times, they completed the trial and everybody is teleported to the next trial. And the last possible trial you can can get is called the Trial of the Assassin. You are put into a small medieval town filled with NPCs wearing randomized knight armor. You and all of the survivors are also wearing randomized knight armor as well. Your goal is to figure out which people are real and hit them with your blade. If you hit a real person, they will lose a life and you will become cloaked for 10 seconds, going completely invisible, allowing you to make an escape and uncloak away from the survivors. If you hit an NPC, however, they will drop dead on the floor and you will not become cloaked. The survivor will also get killer instinct on the dead body for a few seconds, so they know that you chose incorrectly. The survivors have to do the same thing and figure out which one is the killer and stab them with their knife. Upon a successful hit from the survivor, both you and that survivor will become cloaked for 10 seconds, letting them get out of the area and letting you get out of the area. But again, if the survivor stabs an NPC, you will get killer instinct and the survivor's armor will also become stained in blood, so you can identify them easily. They must wash their armor at a fountain nearby to remove this blood. If the survivors stab you 4 times, they complete the trial and everybody moves to the next stage. And the last trial, which will always be the last trial, is called the Trial of the Knight. You are now the boss in a boss fight. You have 3 abilities. Left click will cause you to slam your sword down, creating a linear shockwave effect, damaging anyone that it hits. If you right click, you do a spin attack and you swing your sword quickly in a circle, damaging anyone that's close to you. And if you hold control, you will teleport 10 meters in the direction you're facing. If you hit a survivor, they lose a life and get teleported to the furthest point away from you. However, all of these abilities have different cooldowns. The shockwave one and the spin attacks are a few seconds, and then the teleport one is every 5 seconds. All of these abilities are telegraphed, and because they have cooldowns, the survivors will still get windows of opportunity to stab you if you mistime your attack. If one of the survivors is able to successfully stab you, they're teleported to the furthest point away from you. If you're stabbed 10 times, then the survivors win. Remember, every single time a survivor completes a trial, everybody gains 2 lives. This is basically just a completely new game at this point, and it's not Dead by Daylight at all. But I still wanted to incorporate the kind of characteristics of every single guard and then have the knight be a final boss. Let me know what you think about this. Skull Merchant, enhanced engines. While standing underneath the drone, hold spacebar to grab onto it. You can now control this drone, allowing you to fly horizontally around the map at 6 meters per second, but you can't interact with anything. Press spacebar again to get off the drone with a 4-second animation. So it's really good for transporting yourself around the map at a fast speed, but it can't really be used lethally. However, if you M1 while being transported by the drone, you can kick survivors, knocking them over and making them exhausted, but doing no damage. So you can use this to just kick survivors to the ground, and then if you get off your drone, you know that they're not going to be able to use an exhaustion perk in this next chase. Just like seeing the Blight trip over you. It would be so funny to be able to kick survivors to the ground. After playing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where Leland can literally knock killers to the ground, I want this to be in DBD so bad. Singularity, biological biopod. While looking through one of your biopods, hold right click to teleport your body into it and crawl out of it. You'll still be like half in the biopod and half out, so survivors can see that you're in this biopod. Then left click to do a lunge/slam attack in the direction you're facing. If a survivor is hit by this attack, they will be instantly downed regardless of health state. So it just gives you an additional thing to do with your biopods instead of just like teleporting them and then having to chase them, or just attaching the little thing to their back. It'll let you use these biopods lethally and will really make you think about where to put them in a good position so that your slam attack isn't blocked by like a bunch of obstacles and whatnot. Like if you put it outside of a building, the survivors will be able to just go inside the building once they see you crawling out of the biopod. So you do actually have to think about the positioning of your biopods. And last but not least, Xenomorph, handle attachment. If you're burned out of crawler mode without getting a single hit with your tail, the next flame turret you try to destroy will instead be picked up, allowing you to use it against the survivors. Since it's heavy though, you're slowed to 4.4 meters per second. You can left click to swing normally, or you can right click to shoot the flame turret. If a survivor is in the flames for 3 seconds, they lose a health state. So like if they're just kind of running out in the open and in a straight line, you can easily injure them. Upon being stunned or being burnt by another flame turret, your turret will get destroyed, and you also cannot use tunnels while carrying a turret. Just imagine seeing Xenomorph coming towards you holding a flamethrower, basically. I just think this would be hilarious, and it would still be like a risk reward and a situational thing that you need to know when to use and when not to use, because you won't be able to teleport and you'll be slower, but it'll be extremely easy to injure survivors that are out of position. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and let me know which one was your favorite down below. If you want to see one regular add-on idea for every killer, feel free to check out this video here.